Hello and welcome to Lydia Hawk Designs. Today we're going to piece together the All Occasions flat cap, or the Lydia Hawk Designs flat cap. The All Occasions flat cap took about 6 months to make in 2015, and I built LydiaHawk.com around it. It was the very first serious pattern that I made, and it was the first pattern I ever put up for sale. I've made this version of my hat with Rowan hemp tweed in 4 different colors. I will add that in the description, as well as a link to the pattern. This is, I think, a gorgeous color scheme, and I can't wait to finish it and wear it. We're going to start with the top panel. This is the top of the hat and the back. Then we've got our side panel, which wraps around the top. And then we have our headband and our place for the brim. I've got my semi-transparent brim here cut out rather crudely, but that's okay because we're not going to see what a terrible scissor job I did here. I like to use a straight ruler for placing a button in the brim. I've got my snap button here, and I'll put all of this in the description, but it's included in the pattern. I've got these snaps for holding these 2 pieces together. I've got a bobby pin. Got 2 actually, just in case. I like to use a bobby pin to hold the snap in place while I sew it. I've got my needle and thread for sewing to the brim. The color matches the brim here. I've got my scissors, and I think I've got my tapestry needle. And I think we're good to go. We're going to start by putting the semi-transparent plastic in the brim. First thing I want to do, I've got 2 tails on either side, so I'm going to go ahead and close the brim. I'm going to start by closing up each side. The sides of the brim, and then I'm going to start to close up the sides right against the headband here. And when I get towards the center a little bit, then I'll slip the plastic in. I'm showing you how I do this because I've made 15 hats. I've made several versions of the cabled flat cap. I've made several versions of just the All Occasions flat cap. This is only the 3rd sort of patchwork flat cap that I've made. I'm going to go back towards the end here. Once I'm up here, I'm going to take these end stitches and match them up right along the edge here. And I'm not going to close it all the way, of course, because I have to add the semi-transparent plastic. But I also have to add the snap. I have to sew the snap in before I can close it. So I'm just going to get both sides seamed up here pretty good, close to the center, before I sew the snap on so that it's as centered as possible. It's always a little off, but once it's snapped in place and you shape the hat and dry it, nobody can tell that it's slightly off center. I like adding a snap to it. You don't have to, it's not a requirement. But I just personally love it with a snap in it. I've just gotten used to it. So we're going to do the same thing with the other side. I'm going to close the two side pieces here. And then we go back. And we use this to close up the edge against the headband. Okay. Sometimes I even count the stitches to make sure that I'm getting them all, but it's pretty, I've done it so many times. Once you start at the edge, you can see that you can count them, but it's a tedious element. It's not necessary. I just need to do a few more on this side. All right. Now that we've got our opening, let's go ahead and add the semi-transparent plastic. Get that centered. That looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and close our seams here just a little more. This is one of the reasons why sometimes the button is a little off center. You have to leave it open so it's not perfect, but sometimes it is pretty perfect. You can always undo your work. If you're a real perfectionist, you don't have to weave in the ends right away. You can leave those loose. And if you don't like where the button ends up, you just take the seam out, remove the button, and start over. Oh, I'm getting my needle and thread tangled up in it. All right. Now that I've got this closed more, I'm going to go ahead and use my ruler, my snap, and my thread. I'm going to sew one piece down. So I'm going to take my ruler, right where the edges are seamed up here, right at the very edge where it's seamed on either side, I'm going to go from left to right. That looks like it is exactly 6.5 inches, which would make half of that 3 1/4. So I'm going to place my button right at the 3 1/4 mark, right there. And I'm going to take my bobby pin, I'm going to take it and gently feed it through and hold it in place. And it likes to pop out, so you just do it until you've got it nice and secure. Here we go. And this one actually might be a little big. I might be better off using a smaller one, but if I could just get it to stay like that long enough to get the needle and thread through a couple of those, it'll be fine. So I'm going to take my needle and thread now while it's held in place. Here we go. All right. And gently start right through there. You can use tapestry thread. You just got to make sure that whatever needle you use will fit through the small holes on the snap where you sew it down. It's going to want to come through, so I'm trying to be gentle here. I just want to be delicate with it. I'm going to measure again, make sure it's where I want it. So it's moved a little. So there we go. I'm going to put that there. Should be fine now. It's back in the spot where I want it. And then I just keep doing this until I'm ready to move the bobby pin out of the way. And I'm ready now, so I'm going to move that. And just keep the thread from tangling. And just keep going round and round until I'm happy with it being nice and tightly sewn down. And I think it's still where I want it. It's a little It's a little off to the right. I could start over if I wanted to, but I'm not, because I've done this before and it ends up slightly off center anyway. It's usually just ever so slight. But again, if you're a real perfectionist, all you got to do is undo your work and start over until you weave in the ends. And even after that, sometimes it's not completely finished. You just keep redoing it till you're happy. All right. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to tie the ends together. Help if I cut the thread. Remove the needle, I should say. I'm just going to knot this a few more times. Cut it. I may redo it if once I seam it I'm not happy with the centering, but it looks good to me. So I think it's going to be fine. And I'm going to go ahead and continue to seam with the shorter piece here so that I can use this one to backtrack and start attaching the top. That's a few steps later, but let's get the brim closed up first. I'm gonna have to use the other one anyway because this one's getting too short, I think. Yeah. I'm gonna have to use the end of this to weave in the end. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this longer piece to finish. I looked for a flat cap like this for years, scouring magazines and the internet looking for the pattern that I eventually made because I wanted something more like this. There's so many cute patterns out there too. Crochet ones, knit, but none of them really were quite what I was looking for, especially with the button in it. I had a vision in my head, and then one day I had all the skills I needed to develop this pattern, so I made exactly what I wanted. Very happy with it. So as you can see, that is a pretty good centered button. It is a little off-centered, slightly to the right, but again, even if you knowing me, even if I did my work and started all over again, it would still end up a little off-center. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to set this aside, and I am going to attach these two pieces. And we start inside out. And the way that they are made, and because also this is a paneled piece, it's going to be a little easier visually to show you how it comes together, but there are 20 stitches in the very center. So you just use different parts of the panel to find where it's supposed to attach to the top. So we're going to start inside out on the right. So right side out, the widest part of this attaches to the widest part of the top, and then comes around and meets where both bind off. So let's start there, inside out, and use these place markers to hold our pieces together. So the bind off row is together on one side, perfect. Now we just match this up where the increases and decreases match up, because that's how it's designed. It's supposed to come together symmetrically. The very next place marker I'm going to use will attach the pieces where they're like this is level to about here. Right. Just get some light on it and you can see. And this one right here. Both of these had so many straight stitches right at the end, so that's where these meet up. And then here we've got the top. So right about here, let's see. So right where our short rows, you can see where the short rows, so it was pretty much right after we started the short rows that we need to match up these pieces. So we've got this corner, and this corner matches up where the decrease. So right about here. And really holding the panels together is good too. Now the very next part I'm going to put together is actually right in front. So in your top panel here, you've got 20 stitches, and you've got in the center 20. So you want to make sure that you match up these front 20 with the centered 20. And like I said, when you've got panels here of different colors. It's much easier to see, but you can count them too. And this is another instance where if you're confused or you feel like it's uneven and you haven't put it together properly, you want to count stitches, study stitches, you just undo your work and start over again. I can see it because I designed it, but even I mess up, and while I'm seaming, maybe I don't seam it very well, and I'm unhappy. I'll start over. I just want it to be beautiful, so undoing my work and starting over, it's worth it. Plus, like I said, I've made so many of these. I've learned a lot from making them over and over again. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to go ahead and take care of the very end. And you might have something better than what I'm using. In the beginning, I didn't even have these place markers. I used safety pins, which was tedious, but I had a bunch of them already, so I just used what I had at my disposal. Now I use these, but I sort of envision something that's probably better for this. I just don't know if it exists yet. Okay, so this is the end of the straight side. Now I just need to find the end on this side. It looks like it is right here. But when you press it together, yep, that's great. We do the same thing here. You can go back in the pattern and look up the instructions and then count stitches if you want. But basically for me, I know that around the beginning of the short row is where this is going to attach at the edge. It's hard to see while I'm doing this, but when you make it, you'll understand. Okay, so this is the very edge, and that is going to go here. And again, you can press these pieces together and see that yes, that is correct. As for the rest of it, because the stitches are slightly different along this edge and this edge, you really just want to bring the edges together just sort of hold them together and every so many inches do the exact same thing, and just make sure that you've got a good area where lengthwise they match up, and then just add a place marker. It'll help you keep everything together as you go, because this part is a little loose and kind of flappy, but again, just hold them together. Keep it even. Even's important. It has to look, it has the final outcome, just it has to look right. It has to look comfortable. It has to look like it is evenly seamed. And then I'll put one more in here and then go to the other side. It can be cumbersome too because this part wants to roll. As you can see, that's exactly what happens. You end up bringing together the seam all the way around evenly. You could count stitches as you go, but I don't have the patience for that. If you hold them together and you keep it even, it's going to be even. The only part that may seem not perfect is this corner, because this corner of the side panel sticks out a little bit. So you might feel like you wrestle a little bit with this part, but the end design is so attractive. I mean, I spent 6 months making this a number of different ways, and this was the only way that I could make it and it look right. So now that that's done, I'm going to cut a long piece of the blue thread here, and I just kind of guess, but if I wanted to put a definite measurement on it, let's see. That's probably good. So this is about 6.5 feet. And then I just start at one corner and work my way around, leaving a tail for weaving in the ends. So yeah, we're going to start in this corner and work our way around. And it's long, so just try not to get it tangled. Be patient, you know. I lose patience when it comes to weaving in ends and seaming, but forcing yourself to be patient is definitely worth it. Do it right and it looks amazing. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail here. That looks good. I'm just going to go back and forth, really getting each stitch, not skipping any, not rushing, just nice and slow. It can be kind of meditative actually. And then every once in a while, I'll turn my work inside out, just see if I need to undo it and go back and start over. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I miss enough. Like there are technically 2 loops on each side you need to make sure are together. Every once in a while I'll go through a section and I've missed getting both loops, so I'll have to go back and fix it. Just nice and slow. And in this case, I'm going to have a little bit of a seam. Might be able to see the blue on top of the other colors. So I also want to make sure it doesn't look uneven or ugly from that perspective. And some people like a certain type of seaming, but as you can tell, that looks really good. And this is how I do it. I am not by any means a specialist when it comes to seaming or weaving in ends. It's not my favorite part of the process. And I would say there are some people who are expert at just that. But I like doing it this way. I do this with the walking hat as well. Well, that part looks really good. When you're seaming stitches that are a little different from each other, like maybe, especially like, you know, one side is, I don't know, just very different. And they don't exactly look the same or look like they're the same size. You just have to play with it. Never be afraid to undo your work. Never be afraid to start over. Let's see what this looks like. This is good. It looks good. This is only the 3rd patchwork hat I've made. It's been a while since I've seamed with the color against a different color. And when you're wearing this, a person would have to look really close to even care about the seam. But still, if it doesn't look right to your eye, it's going to bother you. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, great. Wasn't sure, but yeah, that looks great. This is what I love about handmade. You know, there are rules, but mostly it's the rules that you make. You have to be happy in the end with what you're doing. You have to be happy with the finished product. You can modify and alter, and you're supposed to just have fun with it. One of the first people to buy my pattern was actually part of a knitting group. She'd made everything and she was very confused about the finishing, the seaming here. So I took her back to my house and did it for her so she could watch me, because it would be a lot faster if I just did it. And it was for her husband, and it was just a gorgeous hat. I think making this finally, one of my concerns is that even though I think my instructions are very thorough, that someone else could have the same issue. Maybe it's easier to see me do it. I don't want anyone with my pattern unable to finish. So this looks really good. And you can barely see the blue in the seam. It's going to show up a little bit more in the tan, but you can see the way this comes together. It rolls down. This isn't going to be evident unless you look really close, especially along the top here. And then of course it gets smaller towards the front. And, you know, don't worry if you don't cut enough thread. You just pick up and start where you left off with more thread. It's really not supposed to be a stressful pattern at all. It's supposed to be fun. My favorite is the cable flat cap because, I don't know, I get a kick out of making the cables, and it's so pretty when you're done. Just such a handsome design. I made the All Occasions flat cap, which doesn't have cables in it. And then I was online looking at other types of flat caps, and I saw a really expensive hat with cables in it, and I thought, oh yeah, I need to incorporate cables into this. That would just be so handsome. Of course, these hats are inspired by Irish style hats that have been around for a really long time. Just the most attractive hats, I think, in the world. I'm just going to continue to double check and make sure. Yep, that looks good. I like it. Yep, that looks great. There's a tendency to go too shallow when you're seaming like this. And you can pretty much notice it right away when you turn your work inside out to see what you're doing. It looks messy, looks ugly. What you want it to look like is really just very clean. If you don't get deep enough into your stitches along the edge, it can look, well, it's just not attractive. And you'll be able to tell. That's why I constantly check my work. It's very easy to miss a stitch here and there. That is gorgeous. Love it. So you see how I use the markers just to keep marking as long as I get it even, I'm good. It's not an exact science, but it's pretty foolproof. I mean, I've done this so many times now. I've got so many hats that I like to wear intermittently. I've got cotton ones too for summer now. You almost never catch me not wearing a hat. Right in the front is where you really want to make sure you're getting all the stitches nice and clean. That's usually where I have to undo my work and it doesn't look right. So far, that's gonna have to get weaved in. I'll just pull that in later. So far, everything looks good. These front stitches are really loose. They're really big. So yeah, I usually have to redo the front. Of course, if I'm not paying attention, it's usually because I'm going fast and not paying attention. And only at the end do I realize that I have not been paying attention and have to stop and take a closer look. These are really easy to not get right. But this looks good so far. Okay. And if you're not sure, it might actually be easier to just finish the entire front and then look at it, because when you compare the stitches next to others, you'll see if there's anything that looks off, because it'll stand out like a sore thumb next to stitches next to it that are clean. If you make more than one of these hats, it does get easier. Just like anything, the more times you make it, the easier it becomes. And here I'm kind of doing it, not stopping and looking. Nope, that looks good. Kind of looks a bit like a crocodile mouth to me. It's not perfect, but I think it's fine. You can kind of see the blue sticking out, but you don't see loose seams. And again, there may be a better way of seaming, but this is how I do it. And when it's all one color, I mean, you can't see. You have to look really close at the detail to well, no, I mean, there's nothing to see. It's all one color. Like this, we're going to see the blue sticking through. If I really wanted to, I could go back, I could cut the blue, and I could start over, but we've got 3 colors going here, so anything I use is going to stand out a little bit. But once the hat is shaped, it's not going to be noticeable. You'd have to look really close to see it. This is coming together nicely. I'll try to add some notes in here about fast forwarding, which time code to fast forward to if you want to skip the rest of this. I think you eventually just kind of get it. It'd be nice to make a full-blown tutorial from start to finish, but this hat takes me about 8 hours. So it'll be a long video. Maybe one day I'll do like a live streaming. I miss the knitting group. I had fun sitting and talking with other knitters and listening to them describe what they're making, asking for tips. It's nice to sew and knit with other people. I'm forgetting to check my work again, which is not good if you miss one thing and you have to go back. But this looks good. Okay, so it's fine. It's looking really good. And my length of string, well, my length of yarn has been really good too. I just kind of eyeball it over time and it's usually perfect or too long. Rarely ever too short. Yep, looks good. Finally getting towards the end. My tendency is to want to rush to the finish line, but it takes longer if you have to undo your work, so it's worth it just to be patient. Oh yeah, that looks good. Yep, it looks really good. Clean. Nothing unusual sticking out, poking through. Oh no, wait. Yep, looks good. Almost done. It seems a little bunched up towards the end, but I think it's just because a couple of stitches here got long. That's okay. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and backtrack a little bit. Secure the thread so it doesn't come unraveled. Let me double check. Yep, by no means perfect as far as the blue showing through a little bit, but it's not ugly at all. And I may have to find a slightly better solution to the patchwork part of it, because technically you could cut the blue and use different colors throughout. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Okay, now the next tricky part is putting the brim and the top together. But I do this in a way that does count stitches because it centers it properly. So we know we've got 40 stitches through here, and we know we've got 20 through the center of the side panel. And because we have used color blocks, you can see it real easy. So 20 through here, 40 through here. So we're going to count and pick out the 20 stitches through here. We're going to place markers, and then we're going to make sure that they match up this way. And because we don't want an ugly seam here, we're actually going to seam everything this way, so that once we're done, it's all tucked under nice and pretty on this side. So we will start with finding our center 20 stitches here. Now these are a little hard to count now because they've been they kind of look zigzaggy after this seam was put together. But I'm going to use stitch markers once I find the center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. So we lose 2 on the very end, so 38, that's fine. So in order to find the center 20, we need to subtract 20 from 38, that leaves 18. So we'll count 9 from the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm going to put a marker in the very next one. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Same thing on this side. It sounds like there's an idiot out on the road, hot rodding their probably crappy car. Okay. And just to make sure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So those are our center 20. Because this is a colored panel, we already know that this is our center 20, but without the colored panel, you'd have to count them. So basically what you'd have to do is, you can see where the increase is. Well, in this case, a decrease, because we started and worked top to bottom. So the knit two together has a very distinct look to it, and the skip skip knit has a very distinct look to it. And what you do is you use these to gauge your centered 20 stitches. So everything inside of that. So that's the front. This is the front. You can count them if you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, good. And like I said, we want to hide the stitching. We want it to be attractive. So we're going to work from this angle, so that once we seam, once it's done and you pull this over, it's just going to be clean, not ugly. I'm going to work my way back towards this side because it's closer. Make sure I start. Okay, and now I'm gonna go through the first and then make sure it's flipped up the way I want it, and then go through. And then I'll remove the marker. And then we just meticulously work our way to the other marker. Pull it tight so it's not loose. As you can see, now that we pull it over, clean. It is a nice, clean seam, which no one's going to see because the top comes down right over that. But I mean, we see it, right? We know it's there, so might as well be attractive, right? The rest of this is literally just a process of matching up the rest of the edge stitching. And I'm going to have to cut another piece to use, but that's fine. These lights are hot. I'm going to take a quick break and come back. Okay. Poured my glass of wine. I'm going to finish. So we're just going to work our way around at this point and attach the rest of the hat to the headband. Working one stitch at a time, as we've already been doing. Just want to keep it even. We try not to skip stitches because it's pretty precise. We've got 100 around, and we should, I think technically we've got 102, but when you get to the back seam here, in order to make it clean, we're going to have to tuck it in, kind of like that. And actually it's the other way, like that, so that we've got a nice clean line and we eliminate our extra couple of stitches. We'll get to that in a second. Right now, I just want to finish out the blue. So I can start a new long piece of blue thread. Now, as we get to the edge here, what's going to happen is this comes back so that this edge looks like this, and this will start coming together like that. So we'll get right to the very edge here of our brim. Then we'll turn this. We'll line up this part with the headband and start going back and forth like this. And this is where I'm running out of blue and I need to cut a new strip. So I'll just leave that where it is. And you'll see the little bit poking through, but if it's nice and even, it just looks like any other seam. It's just a nice, clean, consistent pattern. And I probably don't need very much of this, but I'm going to count out. I'm going to go ahead and count out 4 feet just to be safe. I'm going to start exactly where this ended, going back through the very last 2 stitches I worked. So there are no gaps. Okay. I tried doing this a different way, and this is just the best, cleanest, most practical way to do this. All right, so now that I'm at the 2 seams here that need to go together, I'm going to tuck this tail in and go through through this one. Basically, I'm going to go through the second. I'm going to skip one, go through the second, and I'm going to go through the second. So I'm going through 3 really, so that I create a clean edge there. And then this next one, just kind of pinch, we're pinching this area, and we're eliminating 1 stitch. And I'll try to go slower when I get to the other side and do it again. And don't get confused. This looks wider, this looks smaller. That's because this is ribbed. The number of stitches match up. So if you end with 102 on the top and then you end with 100 on the headband, and you'll miss one here and there. like this edge on this headband is a little weird. I'm gonna go through. There we go. There we go, okay. This is looking really good. Here we are on the edge again. Tuck this tail in. We've got one here, one here. What we want to do is pinch one, basically just put them one on top of the other and just go through both. And then go through your next stitch in the headband. But definitely pinch them together so you go through 3 basically. So that you can clean up these two coming together. It looks clean because one is basically on top of the other. And the only reason that looks messy is because I need to pull that tail in. There we go. I don't know. Don't like the way. Yeah, I didn't go through this right. I didn't get through it properly. Didn't look right. Let's start over. It's like it looks like a piece of thread sticking out, and it shouldn't. Although when you wash, if you see stitches that are uneven, once you wash the piece, it usually fixes all that. Takes care of it, so to speak. So this piece looks a little weird, but that may just be because it needs to be washed. Still, I'm going to try to get this to look as clean as I can. We go through this first one, then we go through the one underneath, and then we go through the next stitch on our headband. That's better. Okay, yeah, that's fine. It needs to be washed. I think that's going to fix the problem with that little piece poking out. But look, it's not, you can barely tell. And even then I can probably clean it up with all the finishing. Sometimes it's just going to happen that you get a loose stitch here and there. Some people are really good at like perfect clean stitching. I tend to work fast. Like I said, these hats take about 8 hours. I'll knit while I'm watching a program or a movie. And sometimes my stitches aren't the cleanest, prettiest stitches, but after I wash it, it all evens out and looks really nice, clean. What's great about making your own hats, you don't necessarily have to worry about it too much. You can just make another hat if you want to, but I take really good care of my hats. Hand washing them, air dry, very important. I baby them so that they last a long time. I haven't had to throw any out yet. Of course, I've only been wearing them for some as long as 3 years. Sometimes I'll wear them for a little while, wash them, and then give them to someone as a present. Usually a male that I know they'll look really good on. I've made probably 5 green cable hats and then given them away. So now I'm back on the inside, attaching these final pieces. And as you can see, the stitches have lined up great. I'm not wildly off. It's even. So I'm thrilled. I've only got a few left to go. And then I'll go ahead and run this through a few more just to secure it. And fasten the other side of my button, weave in the ends, hand wash it, shape it, and it's ready to go. And if I do this before I go to sleep and I set it out to air dry with the fan in front of it, I can wear it tomorrow. I'll just run it through a few more just to make sure. And there it is. And don't get distraught if you put it on and you don't like the way that it looks. It needs to be washed. In order for it to lay properly, you need to wash it and shape it. It's not going to look right until you do that, but look at that. How great is that? As you can see, centered. It looks great. Now the tricky part. You have to actually put the hat on, close it. So it needs to be flat even. So when you put your hat on, you bring it right down along the edge. Use your finger to find where the first side of your snap is. Put it on there and then use your finger again to gauge exactly where that snap is. And then when you're done, You're going to use your bobby pin to hold it in place and sew it, but it helps if you actually put the hat on first, which is what I'm going to do right now. I don't really have the setup to show you how to do that, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So I'll be right back. So as usual, mine's a little off center. It's also a little closer to the edge here than I usually make it. I usually have a little further out to the edge. If you're really unhappy with your placement, you could always undo your work or just use thread to close the top. It's really a matter of personal preference. Mine is not off by a whole lot, but for me to be happy, I'm gonna have to do, of course it hasn't been washed yet, so it's not laying right, but that's okay. So just to be sure, I want to go ahead and close this. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so now I need new thread and I need beige to match my yarn at the top. The other thing too, what's great about having the snap up here, if after I wash it and I shape it, I'm unhappy with this one, I can just redo it. For now, because I want to shape it with it snapped and closed, I'm just going to go ahead and sew it where it is. Weave in the ends and finish so I can wash it. It took a few passes at this hat to realize that it doesn't completely look right until you wash it and shape it first. I think I must have made and remade the final version maybe 2-3 times before I realized that washing it was going to fix the shape of it. I just got to be really gentle now so I don't lose. I'm going to do this from the back. Try not to pull it through. It'll want to come through all the way, so just very gentle, back and forth. It's not the perfect color match, but it's not far off. It's not so far off that it's awful. Again, so much of this is really just a matter of personal preference. And now that I'm pretty good on where I want it, there we go. Try to get the original, try to get the tail from the beginning out of the way so it doesn't get tangled. And then we just Make a couple of rounds like that. Oops, that was not right. I'm going to hand wash it with gentle detergent, of course. And when I shape it, I'm going to put it on a bowl that's slightly smaller than the brim size. A Tupperware bowl, round Tupperware bowl or a round glass bowl upside down is perfect for shaping it. Okay, so now it's good and tight. I'm going to tie it. And then cut it. Sewing is definitely not an area of expertise for me, but again, I baby my hats. I take really good care of them so that I don't have to make repairs. Now I just need to weave in the ends, wash, and air dry. Okay, now before you do anything, you're definitely going to want to unbutton it to hand wash it. And I'm just very, very gentle with my hats. So just use your fingernails so you don't put any stress on the material or the thread for the button. So you unbutton it, hand wash it. I place it between a large towel for about 30 minutes after I gently squeeze it. You know, be careful not to bend your plastic brim. And then to dry it. So I flatten it in a towel for about 30 minutes. Then I take an old Tupperware bowl. This is, I've had this forever. This is all, I just use this for hats now. And it's about 4.5 inches tall. Any more than that, it's probably too tall. Yeah, so this is about 4.5 inches tall. Circumference is good for the inside of the hats because it's not too big. You could just use a regular dish bowl if you wanted. So as you can see, it fits around the bottom pretty good. And then you shape it. So basically you want the top of the hat here to come to the very edge of the brim. This kind of tucks in naturally, but I just kind of make sure that it looks even on both sides. And then once it's dry, I put a fan on it. And then at the end, I also turn it over with the fan on it because the fan doesn't really get to the inside so good. But this shapes it nicely, and then you're ready to wear it. I've got so many styles of this hat. I make them pretty regularly. I'd also like to mention that when you put the hat on, I always put it on from this angle, and then I shape it on my head. These make really great gifts. It's a handsome hat for male or female. And just to show you the versatility, there's cotton. Cotton is great for summer. There's another cotton summer hat. As long as your gauge is correct, and this is a different kind of yarn. It made for a rather long hat. The width is great. It did turn out a little long, but it's still gorgeous. It still fits great. I love it. And of course in the winter, this is usually the hat I'm wearing. My favorite. The green cabled flat cap. I've had so many of these because I so often gift them. It is a great gift. It's handsome. It lasts a long time as long as you take care of it. It's just a really handsome hat. And when you give something handmade, it's extra special, of course. And, you know, that's me since I was a kid. I prefer to make my gifts. And, of course, I also have the Pageboy hat. I really like this one. I love the color. It's so pretty. Brilliant electric blue. I've even got the flat cap in a chunky yarn. This doesn't have a snap. It's just attached. This thing is so bulky. It's fun though. And I mean, Lion Brand Thick and Quick. Inexpensive yarn, and it's just so cute. Especially on a wide head like mine. It kind of makes your head look a little smaller. And then my patchwork walking hat. Definitely one of my favorites. I had a patchwork flat cap that I gifted. So the next step is to make that one again. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial, for buying my pattern. Until next time, happy knitting!